Hello and welcome to It's Not About the Bike. This is a podcast series about mental wellness, specifically anxiety and depression. Mental wellness is a very broad topic, and it is not possible to cover everything there in the space of a single podcast series. And in this podcast series, I'm intending to just simply cover anxiety and depression, nothing else. Okay. Now, this podcast series, it's not about the bike, is also subtitled "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road," blank. So each of my podcasts will have a different title. This one is called "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Teach Him Tennis." Okay, and so with that, with those introductory remarks, let me get started. Let's take Nirayal. Nirayal is an acknowledged expert on focus and learning. And as a matter of fact, I've been discussing a bunch of stuff off and on with him on LinkedIn. But he's not the only person whose brains I've picked. So here is my question for you. Do you think you might also be able to discuss this type of focus and learning stuff with other experts and gain valuable insights? Do you think it is possible? What do you think? What about professors of economics? What about professors of sociology? Do you want to engage in high-level discussions with professors of, say, the psychology of optimism, for instance? What about professors of history? What about professors of literature? There must be some topic in which you're well versed, and you probably want to exchange high-level. You want to have high-level discussions with professors. Do you think this is possible? Can you really achieve a good understanding of a number of different areas, or at least one or two areas, and use it to improve your own life? I believe it is possible. And in fact, this podcast series has been prepared after detailed discussions with a number of professors of psychology. And I've myself worked with some professors of psychology in the past. In fact, with some of the leading researchers in specific subfields. Now, if you're not born with a silver spoon in your mouth, I come from a fairly modest background. So if you're not born with a silver spoon in your mouth, there indeed may be no other way to solve your life problems. So I'd like to start off by saying there is one surefire way to solve all your life problems. And what is it? Basically, what you do is read a whole bunch of books on the topic on which you're facing the problem, whether it is like finance or psychology or whatever. And in this, you're not aiming for mastery, but just for a solid understanding of the topic. And then you email a bunch of experts to verify your understanding and ask them for help if need be. And then you form your own execution plan, and then you solve your life's problems. And that is the approach that you could say I took for this podcast. I have emailed a whole bunch of professors of psychology just to make sure I understand this area really well. I myself have degrees from Stanford University and IIT and the University of Wisconsin. And I'm also an alumnus of Harvard Business School. So during these stints in these periods of time in which I was in academic institutions, I had lots of discussions with professors as well. And I have utilized this approach for everything from eye surgery to dental procedures. And I'm using the same, and even for business school program selection. Should I do my DBA or should I do an MBA? What should I do, etc., etc. Right? So, and I'm using the same approach here. I try to understand the area really well, really thoroughly before I started, before I prepared this podcast. Now, the slide deck is actually taken from the internet, and it's meant to. It's prepared by the people behind mindfulcompassion.com. And this book, and the ideas I'm discussing here, they'll come from, a lot of them will come from the book, An Introduction to Compassion-Focused Therapy and Compassion-Focused ACT for Anxiety and Depression. The authors are Dennis Turch and Laura Silberstein-Turch. And there's also a book that they have come up with. It's called ACT Practitioner's Guide to the Science of Compassion. I would recommend both these books, and I'll be covering a lot of the material from these books, and I also will be touching upon Buddhism right? So now, when you hear the term Buddhism, you might think, oh my God, he's going to talk about religious stuff. But actually, I'm not. Buddhism is scarcely really a religion in the traditional sense of the term. Buddhism is really more of a set of philosophies, some of which you can accept, some of which you can reject. What is Buddhism? It's defined in the dictionary as a widespread Asian religion or philosophy founded by Siddhartha Gautama in northeastern India in the 5th century BC. So it was formed in the 5th century before Christ. So it is a fairly old religion. It originated in ancient India, and there are some 520 million followers of this religion today, and they comprise 7% of the global population. So there are a lot of Buddhists out there, but it's not a traditional religion in the traditional sense of the term, because Buddhism is a set of ideas which many of which you can reject, and it consists of a set of practices which provide a broad framework and you can reject many of those practices as well. And specifically, I'll be talking about, in terms of Buddhism, I'll be talking about mindfulness, which is a meditative practice which has been shown to be scientifically, which has been scientifically proven. It has been shown to be scientifically effective in resolving issues related to anxiety and